Today we're meeting with Joe Forzani and we're going to discuss how three brothers who got into business created a legacy business, the one mistake that almost bankrupted the company but instead led them to a billion-dollar sale, and as well as how mindset plays more of a game into business than you think it does. I'm Dennis.
And I'm Greg,
And this is the More Profit, Less Stress podcast.
where we provide the tools for more profit and less stress in your business now so you can turn into a valuable asset later. Hi, welcome to the More Profit, Less Stress podcast. I'm Greg Forzani here with Dennis Taekema as usual. And today our guest is Joe Forzani. We brought him on the podcast because two reasons. One, Joe played pro sports in the CFL for the Calgary Stampeders and won a Grey Cup. And we want to hear about winning attitude, how they did that, teamwork, that kind of thing, work ethic. But the cool thing is he and his brother and their best friend started a company in 1975 and brought that same attitude and work ethic into business. And at that time, that was super unique. And that led to a company going from one store to 450 stores and a huge success story. So we want to hear a little bit about that attitude and how they brought that in, those kind of work ethics. Welcome, Joe, AKA Dad.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, for those who don't know, because it's a great story, do a quick, what's the background of how you guys started the company?
I was born and raised in Calgary. We were born and raised in Calgary, the Forzani family. After high school, I got a football scholarship to Utah State University. And from there, I graduated, played my last 2 years there with my brother John, who came down from Calgary to play football. There was no football in our family. My dad was a soccer player in junior high school. Anyway, and then my brother Tommy came down to Utah State. Anyway, to make a long story short, we all ended up playing for the Stampeders for 3 years. And that's where I sort of got my education into competitive sports and competitive life, as it were. And then...
So wait, meaning the three of you played together for 3 years, but you all played longer than that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I played 9 years. John played 7, and my brother Tom played 11 years for the Stampeders. But I think as a result of that, after about the third or fourth year, my brother John had this brilliant idea of opening up a sporting goods store, a running shoe store, because the running shoe business was just taking off. Nike was just starting, was sort of making their launch. Nike was started in Oregon, the University of Oregon, by a person by the name of Phil Knight. And Phil Knight at Nike, which was really interesting, was involved in, he was a head coach of the track team. He got these track shoes with spikes made back in the late 60s, maybe early 70s, for his sprinters. And actually they started winning races. So all these other colleges started calling him up and they wanted to get these spikes too. So he started making them for others. So he finally quit and got into business, and the rest is history. Multi-billion, I don't know what they are, $120 billion company or something. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, so then at that point, my brother John had this brilliant idea of getting into the athletic footwear business and to use our name, Forzani's Locker Room, on the title, so we could, sports people, we had an easy entry into the business because of our football background. And the rest was history. Opened up our first store September 30th, 1975, 50 years ago yesterday. So really interesting. So that was kind of, we just mushroomed into a gigantic company.
I got, in grade 6, you guys brought me in to work in the store to sort clear and black hangers and work, we'll call it legalized child labor. But
Yeah.
what I noticed, and if you can kind of maybe expand on this, but what I noticed is you guys brought an attitude and a mindset and a routine of competitive sports into business. And it feels to me like you just sort of did it naturally because you came from competitive sports. And I think the business world wasn't used to that, hadn't seen that before.
Well, let's put it this way. When I put some thought into sort of this program that we're doing right now as business as being competitive, I looked up the word competition. Okay, and let's get something straight here. Competition is the activity or condition of striving to gain or win something by defeating or establishing superiority over others. It's one's gain and the other's loss. Okay. So when we played pro sports, I mean, you were out there to win the game. Like there's no ands, ifs, or buts. We were there to win, period. But you know what? It was beyond winning the game for myself as a player, and I'm sure you could talk to many other players. It was more for me. It was more for selfish reasons. Like I wanted to make more money. The better I played, the more money I could negotiate in the off season. It was more for just being a better athlete. I felt good about what I was doing. There's a whole group of things, but by and large, we wanted to win the game. When we won the game, I felt better after the game than when we lost the game. And when you bring business into that, business it's not really a one loss per se. Like each day you don't win 6-5 or 2-1. But you do win when you get new contracts, or you supply or treat a customer really well, or you get a good deal on some inventory you just bought, or whatever it is. So the winning and losing is part of business. Absolutely. And I think if you're a business person, you really got to think winning. You got to think winning. And winning is many different things. So I mean, you got to work into a proper mindset of when you're in business. That's my opinion.
What would you say to somebody who said, yeah, but it sounds like too cannibalistic or too not nice, and some people just want to participate? What would you say to somebody in business that is more for the participation ribbon than what you just said?
Well, let's just put it this way. If you've got a bank loan to sponsor your business, to keep it going, and you get a phone call from a banker saying, excuse me, sir, or excuse me, ma'am, but I want my money back. I want my money back. Then it becomes real. Then it becomes, holy Chris, what am I doing here? Like what's happening? God, my whole life, all my dreams, everything is going to be washed out. What's happening? So, I mean, that's really the bottom line, is that you're really trying to stay afloat no matter where you are and what you're doing. Like, that's it. And it's the same thing in sports. I mean, when you look at any of these, the Blue Jays, the Orioles, whoever you're talking about, they're striving to stay on top, to win every game.
One of those two teams is doing a really good job now, and the other one's not doing such a great job.
Yeah, no kidding.
It's funny you said the Orioles.
Like it changes every year. Yeah. That's right. The Orioles aren't, but the Blue Jays are. But it seems like it changes every year. One team's good, and then they go into a 3-year hiatus, wherever they go, and then they come back, and they're good for 4 years. I don't know. It goes to show you that it's all in organizing. It's a whole process. You got to follow a process, and to be on top and to stay there, whatever it is you're trying to do.
I was going to say that brings up so many interesting points. If you look at pro sports, whether it's individual or team, there's always dynasties, right? And there's got to be something different. Like a dynasty's doing something different, whether it's an individual or team, is doing something different than the others. And the same applies to business, right? Because I think, you talk to most business owners, accountants, anybody like that knows the numbers. A lot of businesses go up and down like a yo-yo. And maybe that's like the pro sports, where they think they're acting competitively and they're doing what's right. But to your point about Blue Jays and Orioles this year, like the teams and individuals that have long-lasting careers where they're dominant, so like a Tiger Woods or a Muhammad Ali or a Venus Williams or a Billie Jean King, or name whoever it is, or pro dynasty teams like the Patriots, the Steelers, the Bulls, they were doing something different, right? Yeah. Clearly the same applies in business. So if what would you say to those businesses that are up and down like a yo-yo? 1 year's good, next year's bad, next year's good, then 2 bad years, then 2 good years. Then you were a co-founder of a business that was a dynasty. And essentially that business wiped out every single competitor in Canada. So it became a dynasty. There's something different there. It's not the up and down yo-yo.
Well, Greg, you know what I think? I think that whenever you get into a position of the buck stops with you, Whenever you get into that position, whether you're a president of a company, whether you're a general manager or a coach, whatever you're at that point, you know, you got to decide how much you want to commit. And I mean, how much you want to commit to being successful. Some people, some coaches just, well, they go through the motions, they try to do this, and they got so much money to spend, and hopefully they spend on the right guys. Hopefully they got the right coach. I remember watching on TV, I was watching the Golf Channel a few weeks back, and I was watching a special on Ben Hogan. Ben Hogan is a very famous professional golfer. Back in the 50s and 60s, he would be like Tiger Woods today and some of these guys today. Hogan, listen to this. He said, when I got into a tournament, when I was committed to winning that tournament, period. Like there's no other thing. You know what he used to do? He used to go to tournaments 3 or 4 days before, like everybody else. But what he used to do in his practice rounds, he would take 20 balls out on each driving hole and drive it to an area that he wanted to hit his second shot from. So he knew where he wanted to hit his second shot from. Then he'd go to the area where the second shot came into effect. He'd hit another 20 balls to the green. And then he was on the green. He hit another 20 or 30 balls to where the shape of the green was. He did that on every hole. Like, no wonder he was successful. I mean, he was committed to be successful, period. So if you're in business today, like how committed are we? Really? Like how committed are we? Are we trying to put in time? Are we doing because it's a prestige thing? And hey, I'm driving a new Cadillac. I got a new so-and-so. Or are we really trying to make money and really try to succeed in the long run? You know, how much time are we willing to put in on this? I think that's really important. And I think some other things, I mean, like how do you get better? Like you got to think, you got to be creative. Sports and business is extremely creative. You know, we go around and think that artists and drama actors and all these people are creative. Yes, they are. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But if you're running a successful business, you've got to be creative. You've got to think of new ways of getting better. That's what they do. That's what artists do. They think of new ways of creating better pictures. That's what actors do. You know, they think of new ways of crying, you know, new ways of being mad and angry. Well, what about business people? We got to think of new ways of making money, drawing people in. Oh, it's amazing how creative you have to be. You know, and I think, Greg, as I go back to Forzani Group, I remember John in some meetings. What a great CEO he was. He was full of ideas. Oh, my God. And those ideas was always stimulating. When you got new ideas, you get stimulated. You want to get better. You want to try new things. And that's what we did. And I think it came from football, the routine football. All 7 days, we had 7 days to practice for our next game. Each day, the coaches found out the weakness in the other team. Might be the left side, the right side, could be passing. So what they did, they devised a set of about 30 or 40 plays out of a whole platform of about 200 or 300 plays that we had. But they took the best 30 or 40 plays, and we practiced that for an hour and a half, 2 hours on the field every day for 7 days. Well, when the game came, we were all set to go. And, you know, it's tough to change midstream. Like during a game, it's tough to get into a whole new set of things because you got to get all 12 guys going in the same direction. Well, when we got to Sporting Goods, we knew that we had to plan, and we had to plan every day of every week, of every month of every year. And so the whole sacrifice of making sure that what you're doing is new and different, and practice what you need to practice to get better.
So a couple of things you brought up. Number one was the better you play, the more you get paid. I actually absolutely love that whole philosophy because it goes into everything else. Second thing is when in sports, you kind of know by the time you're allowed to be on the field that you've got a job to do, which is to win a championship. That's the whole goal, is to get to that position. When you guys started the business, was the goal always to become a dynasty, or was it just short-term goals, set up, accomplish so much in a quarter, accomplish so much in a year. How did John plan that out?
I think that wasn't a plan at the start. Absolutely not. But as we started to get better, as the numbers started to come in and as we started to get better, and then we sort of looked at other regions of Canada, the Vancouver, British Columbia area, Toronto area, and saw there was sporting goods, there was shoe retailers that started to expand. They had more than one store. So we started to get into that belief. I know that we had the first store in 17th Avenue here in Calgary, and then that did quite well. And we opened another store in 4th Street in Calgary. And then we started to get into shopping centers. And as we started to progress, as we started to get better, the banks started to believe in us. And they started to lend us the money. And so it was a progression. And I don't think that anybody starts off right away to try to, well, your mindset is to win a Super Bowl, but you've got to start to get customers. You've got to start to prove your worth. That took time to sort of get better and to progress. But you know what? One of the things that was really interesting on that Ben Hogan thing that I watched on the Golf Channel, Ben Hogan made a comment which I think is really, really stunning. He said that he learned more from his mistakes than he did from his executed shots. Are you kidding me? Like, we look at mistakes and get down on it and we try to walk away from it, Like,
Yeah.
it's terrible. But he's learned from his mistakes. And I think back to your question, and about as we started to progress, we learned what we did right and we learned a lot what we were doing wrong. And we tried different fields, and we got rid of a lot of garbage, and we just made a direction to go one way, and we just executed that plan every day. And as we get better, we started to progress. You can think about it right away, but it doesn't happen right away. And through proper measures and discipline, determination, commitment, you start to get into that sort of seat, of going forward.
Wow, you just said something there, learning from the mistakes, right? And I think a lot of business owners get depressed when they make mistakes, or like get oh my God, I got to give up, or oh, it sucks, or oh, staff, or oh, no customers this week, or oh, like the thing over here is going on.
That's right.
And when you said that, the light bulb went off in my head of like, that should be flipped, and it should be flipped into a good thing. Like, you discovered an area for opportunity. You discovered a way to become better, a way to become more competitive, a way to win, right? And probably great athletes instinctively, well, don't instinctively, they grew up they're surrounded in an environment of other great athletes and coaches where that's pounded into them. Like, when a mistake happens, that's an opportunity. Maybe that's a really good lesson for business owners, because they get beat up every day. Something happens every day, like, the grind. But see it as an opportunity versus a bad thing. See it as an opportunity to become better than your competition, because they don't know how to fix that thing.
Yeah, Greg, I remember using an example of that. I remember in my second year of playing with the Stampeders, I was an outside linebacker. I was on the left side, and I used to play it over the tight end. And my responsibility was the outside. Any kind of short passes outside, any sweep plays outside. That's where I had to be to take care of my area of responsibility. Anyway, Ottawa came to town this one game, I don't know, third or fourth game. And I was new at this, I was just starting off in pro ball. And the first 2 or 3 plays, I took care of my responsibility great. But then they started to run the ball up the middle. And up the middle is not my responsibility. But they did it 10 or 15 times in a row, and they would always get 5, 10, 15 yards. And so I said, screw this. I've had enough of this. I'm going to help out. So I hit my guy, gave up my area of responsibility outside, and ran to the middle to try to plug up the middle and help out. Sure enough, the ball carrier came right at me, and I'm right there, and I hit him. I stood him up, and I couldn't wrap him. I couldn't control him. He backed up. He went around the outside where I should have been and went 80 yards for a touchdown. Okay. So I go waddling off the field going, oh no, I think I made a mistake. Oh my God. I think I talk about learning, talk about a learning situation from your mistakes. Right. So I get to the sidelines And somebody comes up to me and he says, the coach wants to talk to you. He's upstairs in the booth upstairs. And put the earphones on, and he's screaming at me. You son of, you got the outside. What are you doing? You got to be the worst thing in this. And he's screaming. I had to take my earphones off and hold it here. He was screaming so loud. So I put it back on, and he finally said one thing. He said, Joe, he said, why don't you do the playing and let me be the coaching? Let me do the coaching. And we'll get along just fine. That was my second year. For the next 8 years or 7 years, I always played my position. And if everybody on the team played theirs, we had a whole team of 12. We were perfect. And that's the way I lived. And I actually made the All-Star team my last year because of all this. So my point is, learning from your mistakes is key. Hey, listen, you know what? I made some soup yesterday. This is funny. I made some soup yesterday. I had a chicken and I threw it in there with vegetables. And you know what I did? Somebody told me to put a little bit of rice in there. So I go put a whole bunch of rice in. I don't know how much. I don't know what a little is, so I just put a thing in. It was quite a bit of rice, put it in there. So I'm stirring it up. Oh, all of a sudden this soup, oh my God, it looks like porridge. Like I can't move it. Obviously I put too much rice in there. So I just learned from my mistakes that, hey, you put too much rice in there. So the next time I'm going to make soup, it's just going to be a handful. And I'm sure it'll taste a lot better and it'll do a lot better. Anyway, food for thought. Learn from your mistakes.
Dennis, I think we got to put the name of the podcast is How to Make Great Soup and Succeed in Business.
Well,
Or how not to fuck up soup. So you made a comment about a mistake you learned from in football. What are some of the things that the biggest mistakes that you think are responsible for your success in the FGL group?
Oh, and I think, and Greg would sort of back this up, when we went public in '96, we got all this money from the stock market. The people bought the company. And so we went crazy expanding. And when we expanded, we didn't have the systems that were necessary to succeed. We just went out and we operated as we did with 20 stores. We went from 20 stores to 200 stores almost overnight in a year or two.
No, overnight.
With the same systems
Overnight.
almost overnight. With the same systems we had with 20 stores. Didn't work. Our CFO had a heart attack. We didn't have the right systems. And we ended up, after about 2 years, year and a half, we ended up about $70 million overbought. We were actually bankrupt in a sense. And everybody was screaming and yelling. So my point is this, if anybody is trying to get ahead and trying to expand and trying to get as big, make sure your systems are set, in place, practiced, developed. Make sure of that, or don't even think about it. And make sure, and when I say systems, your computers, your managers, your personnel, marketing, all those are all set, incline, and then as you move forward, everything moves with you. If you try to rush these things, it doesn't work. Here's me trying to be a hero in football. Plug up the middle, I'm going to be a superstar, and it backfired big time. It's a developmental process. Business, sports is development. It's development. It's coming up with the right things at the right time, tested, retested, and looking at the market to make sure that the market is there to take on this expansion. Like if you're a carpenter and you're in the city of Calgary and you're a carpenter and there's 3,500 carpenters in Calgary and you want to expand this, well, you better make damn sure that you've got a big enough market. And it's not, you're taking care and you're making good money with yours, but in order to expand it, you got to take business from other people. Now we're in competition. Now we're in a win-loss situation, because when you get a new customer, somebody else is not getting that customer. So it's a matter of developing and making sure that your systems are better than anybody else's systems. And that's really the key. And that's tough to do.
So if you guys could have gone back and done it differently, instead of quickly buying up the extra stores that you guys bought up, how would you have handled the expansion in a different way than what you did?
Well, I think if you look at the way that it was done, John had no choice. The banks in Canada wouldn't lend us money at that point. We were overbought by all this money. My brother had to fly down to a bank or a finance company in the States to get money. And what they did was they said that what you need to do, we'll lend you the money to get this thing going. What you need to ask your shopping centers to we're not going to pay them for 2 years. You got to talk to your suppliers and have your suppliers ship product, but we won't pay them for 2 years. If you can get that, number one, and number two, you want to get a new COO in your company that can handle all this. And so John went and hired a couple of really good people, Bob Sartor and Bill Gregson, very, very smart people. They had experience in dealing with companies that made hundreds of millions of dollars. We never had that experience. We never had those people on staff. Number two, we had all these meetings, and the shopping centers and the suppliers agreed to lend us the money, or sort of not pay them for 2 years. The suppliers shipping product and the shopping centers not charging rent for 2 years. Guess what? In that 2 years' time, with the new guys on board, we turned it all around, and everybody was paid off with interest. With interest. That has to be one of the greatest, and I'm not just saying that because I'm a Forzani, but that's got to be one of the greatest success stories in Canadian business history. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
We're talking millions and millions of dollars. And these shopping centers get paid back in 2 years with interest. Remember that, Greg, there were 5 suppliers that said, no, we want our money. We don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And these 5 suppliers, we never dealt with them again. And I don't know if any of them ever made it past. They were selling us, but they didn't believe that we could turn it around. But to make a long story short. So, Dennis, I think if we wanted to do it again, to answer your question, again, you got to have the right people in the right place that know something about expansion, that are confident that this can work. The numbers are there, and then you progress accordingly. You know, sometimes you can get so big, you can sink yourself. You know, it's just too big, and you just weren't prepared for what's happened down the road. But if you've got some successful people that have been there that can guide you accordingly, right, Greg? Those guys like Gregson and Sartor, oh man, Bob Sartor was with Kraft Foods. Kraft Foods was a multi-million-dollar company. He knew what it took. And we all kind of looked at Bob Sartor, and I know my brother John did too, because this was new for my brother. And Bill Gregson, Greg, remember he had what company was with? Bata Shoes. Bata Shoes has 6,000 stores worldwide. So he comes on to us. We got 200 sport checks. Well, he knew what took place. He knew how to sort of execute a major expansion. So you need to have that in the formula, whether it's part of the company or where you hire these people to help you get through some of these areas that are foreign, as it were.
I remember, boy, what a great learning lesson that was. When Gregson started, I remember he sat in his office for something like a full 10 days or 2 weeks. John gave him a assistant, like a secretary, and Bill didn't talk to anybody. He just ran reports for like 10 days or something. Locked in his office, ran reports. Like I remember, I'm going to show, he's in his desk, buried, right, with a pen and a calculator and making notes, and just ran numbers and got and he didn't even go to people to get reports. He sent his secretary to go to people to get reports so nobody could talk to him. He just ran numbers. And when he was done that exercise, I remember he pulled everybody together in the warehouse. It was like 220 people or something. Pulled all of us in the warehouse, and everybody stood there, and he walked out, and he basically said, it was the fastest turnaround speech probably in history. He walked out and said, hey, here's the deal. And he did it on a Friday. And I know he did this on purpose for sure. On a Friday, he put all of us back there, and he said, here's the deal. Everybody in this room is guilty until proven innocent. And he said, all of you, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're a vice president. I don't care if you've been here since it was, like if you've been here for 20 years since the company started. I don't care about anybody. He even looked at me and pointed the finger and said, I don't even care what your last name is because I have the same last name as the company. He said, all of you are guilty until proven innocent. And he said, today's Friday. He said on Monday, I want a plan from each of you on how you're going to turn around or make better your area of responsibility. And then he stopped talking. And the whole thing took, I remember it took like less than 10 minutes. And everybody stand there and he said, like, he basically said, what the fuck are you all waiting for? He's like, go, go do it.
Yeah.
Come back Monday. And then that was a great test for him because those who went home and didn't work on the weekend and decided to come back Monday and start their project, like he axed a whole bunch of people the next week. And I get it. Someone could say, well, gee, that wasn't very fair to make him work on the weekend. But you're looking at a company like you just talked about. You're looking at a company that went from making money every single year since inception in 1975, made money every single year, and then lost $17 million in 1 year. And everybody panicked.
Well,
And we came up with a plan. No, wait. We came up with a plan. And that plan was so good, the next year we lost 34 million. And that's when John had to go do everything you just talked about. And that $34 million loss, the very next year, we made $1 million. Now, that wasn't very much for a company that size, but that was the beginning of the turnaround, which turned into, the rest is history. But that's competitive, right? That's like, you witnessing that comes right from pro sports. If a team's getting their ass kicked, like before we started the podcast, you were talking about how the first year Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson took over the Cowboys, they had 1 or 2 wins, and they turned that fucking team around and won 3 Super Bowls. That's what it takes, right? You got to, and I love how you said, I don't think a lot of people get this, but if you're in business, it's competitive. And you got to win. And I love how you said earlier, because it's so true. If you win, it means somebody else probably loses. But that's actually how life works. Like that is how life works. We want to help people, and that's all great. But at the end of the fucking day, if you want to win, somebody's got to lose. And that's the way it is, and it's competitive.
Well, Greg, I think you brought up something there when Bill Gregson gave that speech of what are you guys doing? I think you've got to be able to sacrifice your time to get better. And that means that you got to put your family, you got to put your good times, your friends, you got to take time away from them. Unfortunately, you do if you want this thing to grow. Like it doesn't just happen. Second thing is too, Greg, I think what's really important, like you need the people. You got to have the people that not only are running the show, but people that can carry the ball too, like your workers.
Meaning the right people,
they've got to
right?
be good. You got to have the right people, good people that are there to share the same sort of creative culture that you're trying to portray. And I mean, it takes, it takes everything. If you're in business, then at that same time too, Greg, we brought on a new computer system, software, all new software. It was state of the art, unbelievable. Never heard of it before. Do you remember that? Oh, then we had to go through trial and error. But in time, in 6 months to a year, that all became part of the whole thing. And in 2 years' time, we were sailing straight ahead. We were going like crazy.
Yeah.
And then we expanded a lot more stores. And right now, I think there's something like 200 or 300 Sport Cheks in Canada. Unbelievable what Canadian Tire has done as well. Anyway.
Yeah. Like Dennis, all this whole story, all this is exactly why we focus so much on system and routine in our program, right? It's why we have all those tools and system. And like this story is exactly why we did that.
I think, Greg, to sort of bring this to an end here, that I think a person in charge of their own business has to believe the fact that the buck stops at their chair. I think that's really the fact of the matter. Having said that, everything from what you say or what you vision or whatever going forward is up to you. If you're not expanding enough or not trying hard enough, I think you're kind of starting to go the other way. Somebody once gave me a really good comment. If you're green, you're growing. If you're ripe, you're rotting. So, like, you don't want to be too ripe for too long. Like, something's going on, man. Something's going to happen. I think you always got to be testing that foreign ground. You always got to be testing new ideas. You always got to be testing, always be a little bit, 10, 15% uncomfortable, and that, I think that's what sort of drives you forward of trying new ideas. Don't ever sit back on your heels thinking you got it made. That's your number one test that can knock the hell out of you.
Any routines you can think of that maybe we didn't cover, like the transfer from pro sports to business, like, being competitive? What are list a couple of routines you can think of that, whether it's pro sports or business, obviously we won't apply it to business, but that people need to think about, they got to have in place.
Well, I think, Greg, I think that when you talk about football, and I'm sure a lot of these guys, it's boring. It's actually boring. Because as a player, all week long, you're going through these 20 or 30 plays, but we're doing it like 100 times a day. Same play over and over and over and over and over. It's boring. Practices were boring. And then you do the same thing on defense. The offense would run the team we're playing on Saturday. They'd run their offense. And we would practice that over and over and over. I mean, it got to a point where the day before the game, I knew exactly what they were doing. Ben Hogan is playing in this U.S. Open golf tournament. He knows exactly what he has to do. He's trying to hit the ball to that area, and from that area is on the green. How boring is that? There's no sense of, God, slicing or hooking or trying to, develop anything else. So, I mean, if you're trying to really get ahead, you got to develop systems that work. And they work every day. You gotta get into a routine of getting better.
What would you suggest business owners do to break that routine they say might be boring? Because they're doing the same thing every day, right? Or every week.
I think that the routine, I know it is, but there has to be a plan where they want to get to. So they have to set their goals high, okay? And so having said that, how do we get there? So that's where you build a routine of getting there with everybody working together in different areas. And that routine, but you're working towards a plan. That has to happen. Like, my plan was to have a good game every game. How do I get there? I have to have good practices, even though they're boring as hell. But I set the stakes high. I like to set the stakes high. So when I got into business with Forzani Group, we set the stakes high. But our planning to get there was great for 20 years. And then we kind of got cocky that we can use that same system going forward from 20 stores to 200 stores. We had to have a whole different plan. And that plan involved bringing in people, computer systems, everything else. And then we developed that. So
maybe you're saying setting new goals, higher goals, and then tweaking the plan to get there is what creates the excitement, which breaks the boredom of the routine. Makes sense.
Right. Look, a carpenter he's doing every day. He's got his clients. He's going to work every day. And everything seems to be good. Great. He's getting tired of this, but whatever. But maybe he starts to be thinking about maybe how he can make more money, even with the customers he's got. Is the supplier that he's got giving him good enough deals? Can he get better deals from him so his bottom line would look better? Is the people working for him doing the job in a week? Can they be doing it in 3 days where he can find other jobs? Is he got a marketing where he's bringing in new customers? Or is he just going through the motions, taking care of everything and everything's good? Well, if that's the case, things are going to start to not be good because the world is changing. The world, AI. What the hell is going on with AI? Every time I turn around, you know what they're talking about now, Greg? They're talking about these professional football teams using AI in their research and development so that they don't need scouts anymore. They can now formulate what the team that they're playing, their top 20 running plays, exactly how they execute them. Everything is done by AI. So you don't need manpower anymore. It's all done by screen. Like, holy, are people prepared for that? Are they looking into that to make their company better? Like, you can always make things better, always. Like, if you shoot par in golf, why wasn't I 2 under? You know, if I made $1.5 million profit, why didn't I make 2 million? Okay, why couldn't have I made 2 million? If you're not thinking like that and you're own a business, I don't know. It just seems like it could get tough down the road. I don't know, and be prepared for that.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because as we're dealing with this podcast, it wasn't that long ago that Alex Hormozi hit $106 million in revenue in one day. And then people were asking, well, how'd you pull it off? And he went back to the fact, he said, you practice something to the point where it's incredibly boring and you know you're ready. It's not just about going
Good.
through and just doing it. It's about
Very
you
good
practice the thing until it's boring for you. And he says, when it's finally that boring, you know you're ready. And I can imagine like a lot of stuff, unless you've done the system and the routine so many times it's boring, you're not actually ready to add anything onto your plate because you have no room. Your brain doesn't have the creative capacity to remember everything. It's the same as like I do a lot of theater. And it's actually funny you bring up how you guys ran your plays so many times because that's in theater when you first get the script and you're reading through it, you're learning to memorize the words. And then once you memorize the words, you're learning to put body language to those words. And after you learn the body language and the words, well, then you can get creative with the character. You can't start with their character's creativity until you know everything. And it's always this stacking concept. So what you're saying is, in order to expand or grow anything, unless you're nailing your fundamentals first, you're not ready to add an extra layer. And once you nail the fundamentals and you add the extra layer, have you perfected the systems for that layer before you go another layer deep? Have you made each level boring before you're ready to expand to the next one? Because your competition's out there looking at everything you're doing anyway and trying to find holes in your boring.
Exactly. I went even a step farther than that when I was playing ball. We went through all the boring routine of practicing while we practiced the plays on and on and on, like all week long. And the night before the game, I would always we did films at that time. Now it's all online and it's all with the computer. But I took films home that night before the game, just me at home. And for an hour, I watched back and forth. So I was extra. I knew exactly, like I knew when that quarterback was going to pick his nose. I knew exactly by when he broke the huddle, what he was going to do. I knew that. So here's everybody thinking that football is just a game of baloney. It's totally competitive, and you want to win. It's major. The owners want to win of the football team to get more people in the stands. People don't show up when teams are losing. Look at the Eskimos the last 4 or 5 years. But look at the Eskimos when they won 5 Grey Cups in a row. The stands were packed. And so how prepared and how good do you want your company to be? That's the golden rule. Some people might just want to be in there just to, make enough to live on and everybody's happy and they've got the freedom to do what they want and everything's good. Maybe that's good. Good for them. But then there's other people that want to get ahead. They want them to be better. And that's where the great success comes and the great companies that do Blockbuster, whatever, is that they're not happy being where they are. They want to go crazy. And I think all your customers that hire business coaches, they want to get better. They want to get better. First of all, they want to survive if they're in that situation, but they also want to get better. They want to make more money. They want to please. By making more money, you get more confidence in yourself. Your wife's happy. Your kids are happier. You know what I mean? Your golf game's better. You know what I mean? Like it's all good. And it's all areas, there's so many areas of business. There's probably 100 different areas. Everything, there's the smallest thing. And you want to get better at every one of those things. And it's hard. It's hard. You gotta take time. First of all, you gotta be creative enough to figure out where they are and what they are. And then secondly, you got to find solutions. And if you can't find them, you hire business coaches. There's lawyers, there's accountants, there's people out there that can help you accordingly. And my advice is not to be afraid to use those people, particularly business coaches, because they work in all areas. They don't just work in numbers. They work in all areas. Or lawyers, they do legal work. If you got a legal problem, hire a lawyer. But how's a lawyer going to help you? Pound nails. Like, what does he know about carpentry? What does he know about retail? What does an accountant really know about the retail business, about how to train your staff, how to buy properly, how to, they don't know that. They can tell you numbers, great. But retail is a complex area. So is pro sports. It's very complex. You have no idea how those tennis players must hit balls for 12 hours a day, 30 days a month to play professional tennis. Can you believe that? And you need to have people that are watching what you're doing so they could advise accordingly. You can't do it yourself. You're playing. You're in business. Sometimes you need outside forces to guide you along and to steer you in areas that you need to be helped with, right?
Earlier, we touched on briefly, Dennis was asking a question around like, hey, what was the goal of FGL when you guys got into it? And something we see is a lot of business owners, a lot of small businesses will say, well, I got into it to be my own boss and, not have to worry about things. And what would you say to business owners like that? Because, there's a good chance those business owners are going to get their ass handed to them and be part of that 80% that fail, right? Because they just don't have that competitive nature. They don't know what they want.
Yeah, that's a good point. Vince Lombardi, when you talk about pro sports, Vince Lombardi
Yeah.
with the Green Bay Packers,
Named
the
a
first
trophy
thing
after
that he
him.
used to say, first thing that he tell his players in meetings, very first thing, imagine being a rookie in the training room or in the meeting room, and Vince Lombardi gets up and he says, the first thing he says, gentlemen, winning isn't the only thing, it's everything.
Yeah.
Winning isn't the only thing, it's everything. So my point is, in business, winning is opening your door up for the next day. And one of the things about, I think, when you talk pro sports and you talk about business, in pro sports, when I tried out with the Stampeders, I had 7 years of preparation for that. I played 3 years of high school football, and then I went to university and played 4 years of college football. So by the time I was 21, I already had 7 years. I kind of knew what to expect. So a lot of it has to do with how determined you are and what kind of an athlete you are. You still have to have athletic ability. So I think that was, for 7 years. Right out of junior high school, if I tried to make pro ball, oh, that would be really hard. Or right out of high school, that would be really hard. Well, if you take a look at business people today, majority, I can't say everybody, majority, they don't know anything about business. Nothing. And they open up, because they like flowers and plants, they open up a flower shop. Oh, great. Okay, good on you. You know all the flowers. But to run the business, no experience. Not a clue. Not a clue. They got a next door neighbor who's going to lend them $20,000 to open up their business. Well, the fact of the matter is this. Do those people that are opening new businesses, are they prepared to go through a learning curve that's probably a year or two long? Are they prepared to learn business? Or is business, a lot of them don't want to learn it. They don't have anything to do. They don't like computers and they don't like business. Well, like they don't like accounting. They're lousy in math. They're all these negatives come into effect. But they like flowers. They love flowers. Theoretically, they should go and work for somebody that owns a flower shop and just be an employee. You'd be a lot happier, in my opinion. It's the same thing with somebody that's, again, back to my carpenter. Maybe my carpenter should just be working for somebody and having people tell them what to do. Because if they have their own store, you got to get your own bank loan. You got people counting on you. You got your staff that are waiting to know what's new and what's happening. They want to make more money. Everybody wants to make more money. And if you're in charge, you got to be able to somehow supply that. And how do you we got to get more business? There's so many parts of business. And people aren't experienced. They're not experienced. And I think that's the toughest thing, is to start training those people, just like going to high school. It's a high school class. It's a university class for a couple of years. Hell, I had 7 years experience before I turned pro. A lot of these guys that are professional golfers or professional tennis players, Even actors, Dennis, they've been on stage. They've worked. They're on stage in junior high and high school. They've taken courses at university. They've been on Broadway, or before they even get into and then they start to get these roles. Well, they kind of know what to expect. Now, whether they've got the ability to keep going and the determination and whatever else, that's another thing altogether. So my point is this: any new businesses they've got to somehow attract a real curiosity and a need to learn business. There's at least a 1 to 3 year experience it's going to take for them to catch on to what's really happening.
Yeah.
That's
And
my
maybe
opinion.
that whole define a championship for a business owner, for sports, that's easy, right? It's we want to make the playoffs, or we want to win the Stanley Cup or
Yeah.
the Super Bowl or whatever it is, or the Masters or whatever they're doing. But in business, I think too many of them start with, well, I start my business because I just want to work for myself. I don't want to answer to anybody. Okay, that's great. But is that really the championship? Because if you're not doing all that stuff we just talked about today, then probably you're going to get your ass handed to you and you're going to be closed. And that's just going to bring a whole lot of stress and failure and all that stuff. So the point being, define that championship, that win, and that definition may change as time goes on. Like in the beginning, it's like, well, I want to work for myself. Okay. And then you realize it's real competitive. And then you realize you want to make money, because at the end of the day, money pays for things in life you want, right? You want to earn that life you want to live. So then your definition of that championship starts to change. It could be, well, I want to make 100 grand a year. And then it's, well, I want to make 200 grand a year. And then it's like, well, I want to make 250 grand a year. And then at some point, the championship becomes, well, actually, I'd like my business to become an asset I can sell when I go to retire, and have that asset fund my retirement so I
Yeah.
can live the
Yeah.
lifestyle I want to live. So maybe
That's
day
right.
one, that wasn't the plan or thought. But if it doesn't become the plan or thought, then your aspirations of what you're going to do with your business, meaning how solid your business is or how well it performs, your aspirations go low, then your business performance goes low. And then to your point a little while ago, then, if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And if your aspirations are not to improve and your business starts to do this, bam, you blink and it's gone. Like we went through that. We went through whatever number of years. It was give or take 20 straight years of making a profit, and fucking bam, snuck up and kicked us in the ass. We lost 2 years in a row. We lost a whack of money. So if you're not always aspiring to be better and achieve more, you're vulnerable to getting kicked in the butt by somebody who's more competitive. It's just, that's a reality. That's life.
And Greg,
Yeah.
in business, you got to be able to overcome defeat. Like, for example, let's bring the carpenter in again. I don't know why I'm bringing the carpenter. I'm lousy at carpentry. But the carpenter that does a job, and all of a sudden, after 4 or 5 months, some job he did, it didn't work out. The wood rotted, and the customer sued him for oh my God, this guy is suing me. How do I handle this? Like, I can't believe that somebody doesn't like my work. Like, is he going to stay in? Like, they got to overcome these obstacles. It's tough. It requires time. It requires diverse experiences, good and bad. And it requires development, learning. It's a learning situation. The first 2 to 5 years is learning. Like, Greg, how many times out of college does a pro athlete start the next year? Very few start. Some do.
Yeah.
Some rookies start.
Very
But
rare,
very
though.
few. In quarterback, they put them on the bench for 2 years so they can see what's going on at the pro level. And that quarterback's already had 7 years experience, high school and college. And the pros, they put him on the bench for 2 years so he can develop the system, so he can see how. So my point is this: with people that are owning their business for the first time, particularly if they haven't had any business experience or any business classes or anything like that, it's going to require learning. They've got to be taught, and they've got to be able to put themselves back in the classroom like they were in high school or college, and start to develop that way within their business. They got to start learning, and it takes time. It does take time. But as they develop, their business, and they're going to feel a lot better about themselves because now they're learning a whole new set of tools, a whole new set of whatever, you know. But I know a lot of people in business that have never been there before that have done really well, and now they're at a point where, you know, they don't know what to do, they don't know how to do it. I often tell them, Greg, I wish that back then, one of the things that if I went back in time, that I wish I would have done more of is to have coaches that I could phone up a coach to really talk to him about teaching me, particularly somebody that's been there, teaching me how to do things better that I don't know how to do, and to be able to talk. We had that. My brother John was that way, but he was always so busy doing his thing. We had accountants. They were good, but they didn't really understand what it takes to motivate staff. What is this? What does an accountant know how to motivate a staff? Really? Come on. You know, he can tell me
Yeah.
about numbers, but you need a whole bunch, or somebody that's going to help me market better. Somebody that's going to help me do my job better at, selling. You know, what does a lawyer know how to something about selling? Like, so we're asking sometimes the wrong people how to advise
Yeah.
us going forward in the area that we most need help in. Like, really, that's kind of crazy. Like, if I'm going to get better as a football player when I was playing, I need a football player or a coach that's played football to tell me how I can get better. Like, I'm trying as hard as I can, but I need somebody that I don't need a fan to tell me that. I used to go home when I was playing for the Stampeders. My dad's Italian, and he was a soccer player. And I remember a few times I'd go in. Always after a game, I'd go to my dad made homemade wine, so I'd sit down and have a glass of wine with him. We just got our butts kicked 42-10 by the BC Lions. And my dad would say, Joe, you got to push more. You got to push. You not to push as stronger. You got to, really? Like, I know what he was trying to say, but he wasn't really helping. You know what I'm trying to say? So those areas that people really need help with, they got to go to the right people. And they're hard to come by, but that's what they have to do. Can't go to your competition. The competition is going to give you bad information. You can't go to your wife or your husband. They don't know what the hell's going on. They just want you to feel better. Your kids are going to laugh at you. So exactly who you go to in the areas that need improvement, self-improvement for yourself, are very critical in expanding whatever it is you're trying to do.
One of the things I like about what you pointed out was the concept of hiring a personal coach to fill you in when you're weak. One of my favorite things in life is actually shortcuts. It's if I
Yeah,
don't have to spend an hour in the gym, but I get the same results in 15 minutes, why would I spend the
yeah,
hour? Like, who
exactly.
can I talk to that's going to show me what I can do better? When I've been done theater, one of my personal favorite things to do is actually have a personal acting coach. When I could be up there, be like, okay, what went well, what didn't go well, what could I fix? Because you can't see yourself is the other problem. You don't always know
No,
where
you
you're
can't.
going wrong, right? So like in the business side of things, you have people that can show you your blind spots and help you overcome those blind spots in ways that you can't do yourself, which is why I also think maybe it's part of the reason why you guys are so successful is because as brothers, you had each other to show each other's blind spots too.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah. It takes a lot of self-worth, a lot of humility to ask for help. It does. Whenever we're trying to do something, and you know, I'm struggling with the computer. I just struggle with it. So whenever I ask Greg for help, I'm going, oh God, I gotta lower I'm humble. I gotta be humble. I gotta be humble as hell. And some people can't do that. It's really hard for them to be humble because in life, we're all trying to be this superhuman, this good at everything. And, our ideas are help. But if you need help, you got to be humble. But if you're humble, you know, you can you can learn more and you can develop more and you can bring more in. I've always told people that want to get ahead, do more listening than talking. You know, we all want to express ourselves. We all want to yap about how good we are and how great, how this and that, and how it's a way of showing off in a lot of ways. But if you're listening you're probably learning, you're probably thinking about, so I always say, do more listening than talking, and you'll get along just fine.
Hey, so what do you think about, like, let's look at sports and then we'll come back to business, but athletes who are really talented, they're athletic, but they don't have the work ethic and the routine or the commitment to improve, right? To figure the game out, to understand the rules of the game, how it's played. What I see in life is there's so many examples where players are great at the college level, like Heisman Trophy winners and that kind of thing. And then they get to the pros and they're done. Like they're done. And the critics say it's because when they get to the pros, the game speeds up. And what that really means is now you're playing against all experts. And those experts are not just athletically gifted. They study, research the game, etc. So they make faster, better decisions. And maybe that's actually what it boils down to. They make faster, better decisions. Like Sidney Crosby, I heard a thing not long ago about Sidney Crosby. They're now testing like brain reaction and stuff with athletes. And they said Sidney Crosby tests like higher than any athlete they've ever tested. Like his decision-making skills are faster and more precise than anybody. And I promise you, I guarantee you, Michael Jordan had that ability. Absolutely 100% for sure. Because you could just see he's always a step ahead. Gretzky just processed information faster. And that's, I get it, there's probably a brain power there, but then there's a skill set behind how am I making better decisions faster than everybody else. So they got to be better decisions, but they got to be faster. And then take that into business. What are your thoughts on that?
One of the things I did when I first got out of university and played ball, I was a teacher. I coached high school basketball in a small town in Airdrie. And, I can remember when I coached, I had a player in the team that was 10 times better than anybody else. This guy could do numerous things well, like unbelievable. And he was a step ahead of everybody else on the court. But you know what? He wasn't very driven. He wasn't very driven. As a matter of fact, when he missed 2 or 3 shots in a row, he got down on himself, and then the whole team seemed to fall. And I had to actually pull him off the court to get better as a team because he was a drawback. He never amounted to much. I never followed him after high school. He just was. So there's a guy blessed. I think the superstars of today in business, in business too, but I know if we're comparing sports, are the guys that are blessed with all these abilities. They're blessed with intelligence. They're blessed with athletic ability. They're blessed with size. They're blessed with speed. They're blessed with a lot of that. And they're motivated. They got it all. Motivation is 50%. 50%. And they've got it all. Those are some of the superstars if you go around and take a look at the Jordans or the Tom Brady's and whatever else in the world. But then there's a lot of people, the majority, I didn't quite have those athletes, superstars on my basketball team, but man, were they driven. Oh man, they'd go through a brick wall for me as a coach. They would just dive for balls. They would take shots and rush for a rebound, and they would just go crazy with if that other kid had that kind of drive, oh my God, he'd be in the NBA kind of thing. I think, Greg, to go along with the athletic side is the fact that you got to be determined. You got to be determined to hit goals that are beyond imagination. I think some of those superior Tiger Woods, oh my God. Tiger Woods has won 103 tournaments or something. 103. There's a lot of guys playing professional golf today that might win 2. That might win 2 or 3.
Or win none, have not won. Yeah.
And how do you do that every year for 25 years? You got to be driven. You have to be driven. There's nothing else. There's nothing, he's got the ability, but he's driven to get better. I think in business, people don't know what it's like to be driven. They don't have that experience. They've never, what are people like that own businesses that if they got beat in the track meet when they were in junior high school, how did they react? Or how did they react if a bully came along and started to show his power? Did they just walk away and cry? I'm just saying, my point is, or how do you prepare yourself if you're driven to overcome the weaknesses as well as to get better at your strengths and overcome your weaknesses? Like a lot of people can't do that. It's really hard. And I know that those guys can do it. Plus they have the ability to do it. I don't know. That's my advice is you really got to be driven. Another thing is you got to do, and I think it's really important as a business owner, a first time business, not to be too hung up on doing big things great. Do small things great. Do really good at those small things, because by doing good at the small things, they're all building confidence. They're confidence builders. Little small things, getting a new customer, doing a job a little bit better, spending more time doing it right, hiring a staff, a good staff, do little things better. And that sort of builds large things down the road. And as you keep doing that, you all of a sudden start to do big things better. And I think that's really important. But you got to be good at the small things, and particularly weaknesses and what you're trying to do.
It just reminds me of an interview I was listening to with a gentleman who's a former Navy SEAL. And he was saying that in the SEALs program, he says, you have people that sign up for the SEALs program who are natural athletes. They don't make it.
Yeah.
You got people that sign up for the SEALs program that are naturally fit. They don't make it. And so they thought, well, maybe the problem was we don't have enough pre-training for the Navy SEALs. So they started being harder on people to get them more physically ready for the SEALs. And he said, all we had was bigger, faster dropouts. When you look at Hollywood, Hollywood shows you this big, buff, jack, let's get going type Hollywood Navy SEAL. But he says the guys that pass Navy SEALs are the average guy you would never see, never pick out on the street. He says they just have something in their brain that won't let them quit. And I think that's what you're saying in sports as well as business is there has to be a goal that you have sitting in your brain that just won't let you quit. Otherwise, when things get tough, like you guys as an organization, when you made that big mistake of expanding too fast, could have just as easily picked bankruptcy.
Yeah.
That was a viable option. But instead there was, okay, well, let's fight through it and see where we get to on the other side. That takes a special kind of person to want to push through that hard.
You know, I got to give it to my brother John that he never said die. He went on, and he's the one that went down. No banks would lend us money in Canada. Can you imagine that? No banks would lend you money. We're $75 million overbought, and nobody's going to lend you money because all our loans were maxed out. We're done. And John found a guy down the States. I won't mention the company, but he found a company that would do it under these provisions. And we went back, talk about humility. Talk about a year before, 2 years before we went public. We're on top of the world. Everybody, oh God, we made it. It's done. It's over. We've accomplished everything. Oh, holy shit. And just like that, the snap of a finger, we were bankrupt. We were like, nobody's going to lend us money. And we needed money to succeed. Holy shit. So talk about humility, being able to, go back, learn, do what everybody else tells us to do. We had to follow their rules and to do all this, like going to work for somebody for 2 years.
That was hell on wheels, man. That was going to vendors and like trying to get them to ship the next season's products when we haven't paid our bills, and they're like, well, why should I ship you? And I'm like, I'm trying to convince these brands to ship us when I don't control the checkbook and when they're going to get paid. But it's true. But you know what, Greg? When the reason that did ship, Nike and Adidas and all these guys shipped their product, even though they knew we were maxed out, and they saw the overall plan, they saw the fact that we're bringing in new CFOs and COOs, the fact that we had a whole new marketing structure, new computer systems. They saw that whole plan and they believed in us. Of course. Yeah. And there's a strong possibility that a lot of those guys, if we didn't make it, they were going to go bankrupt themselves because they were into us for a lot of money. But they believed in us, and that really propelled them. And so it was a good learning thing for them too. Something I learned later through all that, and to your point, it was a much bigger risk than we all realized, because that first go around, they were insured on most of that. But yeah, that's right. Once they started shipping the second go around, that's right, there was no insurance. Insurance companies wouldn't give them insurance on those shipments. So now we're asking them to ship, get paid later, and there's no insurance. Now it's a real risk. Now, like that was, it was so hard. I remember sleeping in the office a few nights a week, like literally, because it would save me. I'd get more work done because then I wouldn't have to drive home and then drive back in the next day. I'd fucking sleep in the office some nights. like in my chair. It was unbelievable.
Didn't want to talk to anybody. I mean,
Yeah,
I was embarrassed to talk to
right.
my staff, you know. They're going, Joe, what's going on? Like, what's happening? We heard that the company's not doing well. Oh, God. Yeah, we're not. Could you imagine what it took for John to fly down to New York City to this financial guy and actually beg for money? Could you imagine? Not too many CEOs today could do that anywhere. They couldn't do it. They just as soon go bankrupt and just salvage whatever you can and just get out. It's too hard. But maybe John did that or helped him do that because of playing ball. We had a lot of tough losses. And John playing guard, he had that's a tough position to play. He wasn't the biggest guy in the world, but he survived. And he learned how to survive. And I think it helped. Wasn't everything, but it did help.
And I think what made it all work when he came back and we had to go to the landlords and the suppliers, because I did a lot of supplier talks. I think what made it work was we had a plan that those people understood and therefore believed, and then worked with us. Like without that actual plan that was believable, because you can throw a plan together, but if it's not believable and realistic, then nobody's going to back you or work with you. But we actually truly had, like, we worked out a real good plan and it made sense. They bought in, they rolled the dice, and that was huge. So I think that's a lesson for anybody, any business in trouble, or it's not working the way you think, or you're stuck at a certain level, you can't get higher. Like you gotta build a plan that actually makes sense and will work. And then people will believe it, they'll engage, and then you go execute. And there's going to be changes along the way, and you got to zig and zag, but you got to have a plan that everybody believes is going to work, which means there's got to be a plan that is going to work.
Well, when John went down to get that money from that last person, that was the last person. We were a public company. Our stock dropped, like everything was bad. And I'm sure when John came back to Calgary after meeting with them and they gave him what they wanted us to do, I'm sure he didn't know if it was going to work. But he put the plan in action. He believed in Gregson and Sartor. He believed in the new system, believed in the people that we had and what we were trying to do. Jeez, son of a gun if it didn't work. And went crazy. We sold the company about 96, 2006,
2010.
2010, about 14, 15 years later for $1 billion. Can you believe that? We sold the company for $1 billion. And in 96 or 98, we were like done. We were done. Unbelievable.
Crazy.
Unbelievable how things like that can happen. But, one thing I'd like to say about business owners, when you're running a business, you got to sort of get a business mentality. You need to really understand not only the area that you're in, because you should be loving that area, like whether it's our flower person or whether it's the carpenter or whether it's the actor, whatever it is, you got to love that area. But you got to understand what comes along with that. And it's just not flowers. There's other things that are involved. There's how much money you're making. Because whenever you bring into money into an equation, it becomes real. Money is real. Like it's dollars and cents. It's winning and losing. Everything else, when I was in junior high school, won a game, great. If we didn't, when I was in high school, it was, we partied good if we won, And in college, it was great because I got a free education. But today, college players are even getting paid. But anyway, that was great. But the moment you get into pros, or the minute you open up a business and there's dollars and cents, the game is on. There's a game on. You got to produce.
Real.
It's real. There's no going back. There's no, well, I think I'll try, Now it's up to you to not only survive, but to survive, do well with everybody around you. Because it's not just you. There's 1,000 things involved. It's where you're going to live. It's the kind of car you drive. It's who you married and how long you're going to be married. It's the food you eat, the activities you do. It's the staff that you have. Everybody's counting on you. Like there's a whole circle of people around you. The better your business is, the better that those people around you are going to feel about you and themselves, because you're the motivating factor. You know, it's amazing. It's not just something opening up and I'm going to have a good time. It's not. That's only a wee bit part of it.
Thanks, Dad. Really appreciate it. I think there's some great lessons there on the whole competitive sports coming into competitive business. Thanks for sharing the stories and the insight. I know the listeners will appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, enjoyed it. Good luck to everybody.
Thanks for listening to the More Profit, Less Stress podcast. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast platform and leave a comment or review if you're feeling generous. To learn more about us and what we do, check out our website. Until next time, take care.